Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had endured a grueling half-decade of fierce partisan battles, ethics, investigations, and even a president suggesting she leave the country. Yet she met her match during a 40-minute exchange with JD Vance simply because he opened a remarkably thin folder. For 3 weeks, the Joint Economic Committee's hearing regarding the urban cost of living crisis had been carefully planned, generating a palpable sense of suspense throughout Washington. The atmosphere inside the room was heavy and electric, amplified by 40 high-definition cameras and live broadcasts from every major network beaming into the homes of a fractured country. While C-SPAN provided uninterrupted coverage, CNN and Fox News utilized split screens to capture the looming clash, recognizing that this was far more than a routine policy debate. It was a monumental political arena. Stuffed to maximum capacity, the audience gallery was clearly segregated, resembling a polarized war zone. Left-leaning activist groups filled one side, right-wing media figures took over the other, and the weary general public, having braved freezing temperatures since 6:00 a.m. for just 50 seats, was sandwiched in between. These attendees endured the wait for the same reason the internet was buzzing. Putting Ocasio-Cortez and JD Vance in a single room was a recipe for surefire political drama. She excelled in these moments, wielding a natural and formidable command over modern politics, backed by 13 million X-followers, 8 million Instagram fans, and the title of Blue Sky's top user. During her 8 years in the Capitol, she had perfected the exact science of commanding a physical room versus captivating a camera lens, treating both as distinct, highly weaponized talents. Precisely 12 minutes into a fiercely practiced 11-minute opening statement crafted over a full week by her PR team, she made a seamless transition. Pivoting away from the committee's chair, she locked eyes straight onto the vice president. I want to speak directly to the vice president, as I believe the American public has a right to know who is evaluating working-class families today, she announced, her tone hitting a meticulously tuned balance of moral anger and sharp intent, the precise pitch designed to create viral moments online. Bending toward her mic, the bright bursts of camera flashes highlighted her distinct profile. Mr. Vance authored a bestseller about his impoverished Appalachian childhood, which earned him millions. Following that, billionaire Peter Thiel bankrolled his Senate run. He wed a fellow Yale Law graduate, relocated to the Naval Observatory, and now he is here lecturing my district's residents, individuals working dual shifts who still struggle with rent, about living expenses, she stated. She held a solitary, theatrical pause, utilizing the precise fraction of a second she had extensively rehearsed with her team for maximum impact. You did not pull yourself out of destitution, Mr. Vice President. Peter Thiel hoisted you out, and today you serve a billionaire commander-in-chief. You have left Middletown behind. You are simply venture capital dressed in a flannel shirt. The seating area right behind the Democratic aides exploded into quick, enthusiastic clapping, unleashing the stored energy of attendees who had lined up since daybreak just to hear that manufactured quote. Before the room's cheers even subsided, the footage was aggressively uploaded to X, and it took merely a minute and a half for flannel shirt to become a worldwide trend. Meanwhile, the vice president remained seated at the edge of the panel in a hastily provided chair, dressed in a tie-less dark suit and exuding a chillingly calm demeanor. Resting flatly between his hands on the wooden desk was his exceptionally slim folder, which contained only 5 plain dividers and remained firmly shut. Throughout her fiery speech, he hadn't uttered a sound, written a single note, or even twitched. As the crowd's chatter faded, Vance methodically flipped open the slender file, a calculated action that felt as though it sucked the air straight out of the massive hall. From that incredibly small pile, he carefully extracted 3 FEC documents, a damaging ethics summary, and an invoice from a ketamine-focused psychiatrist getting ready to question why contributors giving an average of $16.81 were footing these bills. Retrieving one piece of paper, he centered it on his desk and moved toward the mic, his words slicing through the lingering murmurs with surgical precision. Thank you, Representative. I'd like to discuss the destination of your campaign donations, he opened, devoid of any theatrical rage, adopting instead the deadly pacing of someone relying on rhythm rather than mere words to convey undeniable facts. Back in 2017, Sekat Chakrabarti, your chief of staff, established Brand New Congress, LLC. Concurrently, he helped launch the Justice Democrats PAC, all while acting as your campaign manager. Glancing up to meet her gaze, Vance continued. From 2017 to 2019, those entities transferred roughly $885,000 to Brand New Congress, LLC, labeling the transactions as strategic consulting. The quietness within the chamber grew palpably thick. Your campaign workers were employed by the LLC was bankrolled by the PAC, and the individual directing the LLC was simultaneously directing your election bid. Placing the paper down intentionally, he said, "Let me quote former FEC Commissioner Hans von Spakovsky regarding this setup. If the facts, as alleged, are true, and a candidate had control over a PAC that was working to get that candidate elected, then that candidate is potentially in very big trouble and may have engaged in multiple violations of federal campaign finance law." Concluding the quote, he grabbed a second document without batting an eye. Bradley Smith, another former FEC chairman, was even more direct, stating, "If this were determined to be knowing and willful, they could be facing jail time." After finishing the second quote, he aligned the two incriminating statements together on the polished desk. When the FEC examined this complaint in 2022, they threw it out, not due to your innocence, Representative, but because the statute of limitations had passed. Time simply expired. As you are well aware, that is vastly different from an exoneration. His tone stayed remarkably hushed, carrying the inherent softness of someone raised in a turbulent home where loud noises signaled immediate peril. He knew how to present ruinous facts, much like a surgeon makes an incision, with absolute precision, zero wasted movement, and a complete understanding of the underlying damage. Leaning closer, Vance shifted from his detached demeanor to a deeply personal one. "I'd like to share a bit about my campaign treasurer, Representative. Her name is Donna, a former educator from Middletown, Ohio, who drives a 2009 Chevy Malibu, and she managed our finances using a $4 Walmart binder. He maintained eye contact, giving her no chance to avert her eyes. We never formed an LLC because we didn't require one. When there's nothing to conceal, you don't need a hiding place." Tapping the campaign finance report, he noted, "Your average donor contributed $16.81, totaling 571,000 separate gifts in just a single quarter. These aren't wealthy elites, Representative. They are ordinary folks who forgo a coffee just to support you." With palpable Midwestern scorn, he added, "Yet that cash exited their wallets, filtered through a PAC, funneled into an LLC, and landed with your campaign manager, while those giving $16 remained completely in the dark about its final destination." Before she had a chance to counter, Vance produced a third document displaying a carefully detailed committee review regarding the questionable billing habits of Brand New Congress, LLC. Analysts on this committee examined the billing history and found that during this time frame, the LLC billed for tasks that seemingly duplicated the duties already handled by your own campaign team. He rattled off the list, much like a prosecuting attorney laying out a suspect's motive. Strategy sessions already organized by your scheduler, online ads already secured by your communications head, and donor outreach already managed by your finance crew. Your PAC was footing the bill for work, the LLC claimed, which your staff was already executing. Looking up with a cold, steadfast stare, he stated, Representative, that isn't strategic consulting. That is maintaining a secondary set of ledgers. Ocasio-Cortez, whose hands had been gesturing smoothly since she began speaking, abruptly pressed them flat. Instead of pulling them back, she slapped them down onto the oak desk with widespread fingers, bearing down as if someone gripped by fear trying to steady themselves on a suddenly unstable floor. Though a tiny movement, its mental implications were massive, performing hands rise while hands fighting to anchor a crumbling reality push downward. She thrust herself toward the microphone, her pitch elevating in an alarmed, defensive manner. Mr. Vice President, the nature of these financial ties was exhaustively examined by the FEC, who threw out the complaint due to the expiration of the statute of limitations. Vance remained unfazed, kept his volume steady, and treated her outburst merely as an incomplete thought, begging for a conclusion. Not because you were proven innocent, Vance interjected, piercing right through her loud defense. Not because an evidentiary review proved no wrongdoing occurred, but because time expired. Back in Middletown, Representative, we don't consider that an exoneration. We consider that catching a lucky break. Her statement, frantically driving toward the word dismissed, as if that legal term could magically erase the issue, was abruptly slaughtered on the desk, dividing them. Her jaw clamped tightly, completely constricting the orbicularis oris, the intricate muscle ring responsible for keeping lips tightly sealed. It formed an airtight barrier, akin to a massive steel vault bolted from within by an individual suddenly aware that any further spoken words would become permanent federal evidence. Without a hint of victory on his face, Vance ruthlessly flipped to the subsequent tab. September 13th, 2021. The Met Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He delivered the phrase without any malice. Rather, he spoke it like a detective reciting a timeline they had scrutinized for months. Met Gala entry runs $35,000 per individual, yet you went entirely for free as a museum invitee, donning a bespoke Aurora James dress emblazoned with "Tax the Rich" on the reverse side. He rattled off the perks with a steady cadence. A complimentary dress, complimentary hair, complimentary makeup, and completely complimentary round-trip transportation. Letting a heavy silence wash over the hearing, he added, "An investigation by the Office of Congressional Ethics determined that you, to quote their exact findings, may have accepted impermissible gifts associated with attendance at the Met Gala." Staring intently at her, he continued, "They discovered that you failed to reimburse the dress, the glam squad, or any related expenses until after the inquiry commenced." He allowed the term "after" to strike with physical force. Only after. Not beforehand, not the following day, not even a month later. It was strictly after the probe initiated, when investigators inquired about the funds, that you finally settled the bill. He then extracted a demographic overview of New York's 14th congressional district from his file. Throughout Hunts Point, Parkchester, Mott Haven, and the South Bronx, your district, the median income hovers at $41,000. In areas where $35,000 covers nearly a year of rent for a struggling household, you paraded that exact figure on your shoulders for a 4-hour billionaire soiree, only pulling out your wallet once you were caught. His vocal tone took on a menacing edge, radiating the harsh, bitter chill of an Ohio winter. "Representative, I intend to identify this behavioral loop, as it is crucial for the committee to observe it plainly." Laying the papers out sequentially, he began, "In 2018, $885,000 flows into a strategic consulting LLC run by your chief of staff. No questions asked, no bills paid, and zero disclosures made until an FEC grievance mandates it. Then in 2021, $35,000 worth of freebies as a guest of the museum for the Met Gala. Again, no payment is rendered until ethics watchdogs demand an explanation." Leaning back, He fixed his gaze on her shaking form. The cycle is undeniable. Grab first, justify afterward, and settle up only when cornered. Where I grew up, my mother had a specific term for folks attending lavish events to scold the wealthy while draped in compte couture. She never labeled them activists. She simply called them guests. Suddenly, the massive wall monitors illuminated, showcasing a comprehensive breakdown of her campaign spending. The screens displayed a harsh itemization of expenses over the year, leading up to March 2026. During that single year, your operation dropped $53,000 on high-end hotels and lodging, Vance stated, observing her drain of color. Conversely, the budget for constituent services in your district, the actual funds, meant to assist Bronx and Queens residents with Social Security, immigration files, and casework was 31% lower than the average New York representative's allowance. Tapping his pen on the mic stand, he said, with an average donation of $16.81, those small dollars are bankrolling your celebrity status rather than local necessities. They purchase flights to the Munich Security Conference and opulent suites for your fighting oligarchy events. Yet they fail to secure winter heating for Dorothy Chen's icy apartment in Parkchester. Ocasio-Cortez's masseter muscle clenched fiercely, an uncontrollable tension that sparked at the rear of her jawbone and rippled forward. It was the fearful reaction of someone being forcefully confronted with their own meticulously crafted history, laid bare in an unrelenting timeline. Historically, these occurrences, the LLC, the gala, the travel, stood as distinct controversies, each armed with its own public relations spin. However, by laying them out side by side, Vance allowed the bewildered panel to recognize what her PR staff had hidden for half a decade. Every unrelated scandal was actually part of the identical narrative. As Vance flipped to the final section of his slender file, the very atmosphere in the chamber shifted prior to his next word. Observers knew immediately, just from the severe way he turned that page, that a devastating blow was imminent. With the binder nearly depleted, Vance lowered his tone to a faint murmur, saying, "Representative, let's discuss a certain psychiatrist based in Brookline, Massachusetts." Next to the Congresswoman, her elite defense lawyer, an intense woman in a gray suit who had been sitting as still as stone, abruptly leaned forward a couple of inches. Just 7 weeks prior, the targeted lawmaker had submitted an official campaign expense of $18,725 to a ketamine-focused mental health professional, audaciously categorizing the payout on federal documents as leadership training and consulting. Holding up the last paper, Vance announced, during March of 2025, your political fund wired $6,575 to Dr. Brian W. Boyle in Brookline, Massachusetts, a payment clearly labeled on your FEC paperwork as leadership training and consulting. Continuing without taking a breath, he stated, by May 2025, another $5,450 went to Dr. Boyle under the identical label, followed by a $6,700 payment in October 2025 for the same purpose, culminating in a total of $18,725. He dropped the bombshell financial record onto the table, perfectly aligning it with the campaign timeline, the district demographics, the PAC breakdown, and the Met Gala review. 5 pieces of paper constituting a political career summarized through invoices alone. Vance then clarified, Dr. Brian W. Boyle is a Harvard-educated medical psychiatrist. Based on his active website as of yesterday, his focus is interventional psychiatry for anxiety, PTSD, and severe depression. Furthermore, medical journals hail him as a top ketamine therapy expert whose facility even administers stellate ganglion blocks neck-injected anesthetics used to mute the human fight-or-flight reflex. Gazing at her without blinking, he continued, Absolutely nowhere across his professional bio, academic papers, or official site does he advertise leadership training or political campaign consulting as available services. He does not offer a single treatment that aligns with the bogus designation your team utilized to report these expenditures to the Federal Election Commission. The ensuing quiet was foundational, an oppressive stillness brought on by an entire audience mentally realigning with this new truth. Allowing the bomb to drop, Vance waited before resuming in a softer, purely objective tone the terrifying cadence of a veteran litigator confronting a defendant with forged documents. Representative, the law strictly forbids spending donor money on personal items. The metric is straightforward. If you would incur this cost, even if you weren't running for office, meaning these were private medical treatments, then utilizing campaign dollars is a federal crime punishable by massive fines and up to a half decade behind bars. Refusing to give her a breather, he added, on March 27th, 2026, the National Legal and Policy Center lodged an official FEC complaint, which was subsequently sent to the Office of Congressional Conduct with a request to escalate it to the House Ethics Committee, a body equipped with subpoena authority. Leaning closer, he asserted, I am not throwing out a random allegation, Representative. I am merely quoting your legally certified paperwork, and I have one basic inquiry. Staring at her with immense patience, he asked, exactly what $18,725 service did Dr. Boyle administer that lawfully constitutes leadership training? An overwhelming void filled the room. Realizing that the 571,000 earnest individuals donating their $16.81 believed they were backing a politician, not funding her private ketamine therapy. These supporters carved out space in their strained finances under the assumption their money was serving a broader purpose. Was that money advancing a cause, Representative, or just pampering an individual? Suddenly, Ocasio-Cortez's respiratory rhythm shifted drastically. Her body underwent the frantic biological adjustment triggered when the diaphragm realizes an immense surge of oxygen is immediately necessary. Her nostrils widened almost imperceptibly, prompting her top-tier lawyer to finally take action. The attorney purposefully laid her right hand completely flush against the solid desk, right in the tight gap separating her from the Congresswoman, with her palm pressed down and fingers extended. This severe motion wasn't a gentle hint, it was a solid blockade. The gesture clearly commanded, do not say a word, and absolutely do not answer him. It warned her to swallow whatever she was preparing to utter, given the 7-week-old FEC grievance and the reality that every syllable spoken there constituted legal evidence. Ocasio-Cortez glanced at the pale fingers, looked over at her counsel, and then returned her attention to Vance. She remained totally mute, while Vance kept the file open. Instead, he carefully advanced to one solitary page hidden behind the final divider. Just one final point, Representative. This isn't regarding finances, but rather trust, he uttered gently. During the Capitol riot on January 6th, 2021, you fervently expressed to your Instagram audience and the broader media that you feared for your survival, stating exactly in your live stream, I thought I was going to die. Vance locked eyes with her, continuing, you insisted this wasn't hyperbole, recounting how a man was violently pounding on your door, demanding your whereabouts. You claimed you were cowering in your bathroom in sheer panic. He took a brief pause. However, that aggressive individual pounding on your door was actually a Capitol police officer deployed to escort you to safety. And since your office sits across the street in the Cannon House office, building a structure the rioters never breached your own neighbor, Representative Nancy Mace publicly confirmed that insurrectionists never even entered your corridor. Laying down the transcript, he said, I do not doubt your fear, Representative, as the whole complex faced danger. but I am challenging the monumental gap between reality and the narrative you sold the American public. His tone swelled with a justified sadness. On 9 over 2,977 victims perished, and during the Capitol riot, officers were savagely attacked, with Brian Sicknick losing his life. Those are genuine traumas. So when a leader exaggerates their own peril, framing a protective officer as an attacker and claiming presence in a compromised building they weren't actually in, it siphons legitimacy from the true victims to prop up a personal brand. Leaning back, Vance noted, "I was standing inside the Senate chamber on January 6th, not in an adjacent facility, but right in the chamber, yet I didn't hop on Instagram to chronicle a near-death tale. I simply phoned my wife to confirm my safety and resumed my duties." He stared back with the weary expression of someone who has witnessed individuals fabricate hardship right in front of those who genuinely suffer. The cycle remains intact, Representative. Hijack an event, blow it out of proportion, and leverage it for branding. PAC funds detour through an LLC, a Met Gala pass transforms into online clout, a mental health professional masquerades as leadership guidance, and a national crisis morphs into Instagram material. Ocasio-Cortez's once dominant, aggressive stance had completely dissolved. Her rigid back now rested entirely against the leather seating. Her shoulders slumped into the cushion, resembling shifting sand settling after its core support collapses. The media-trained posture and precisely calculated facial expressions designed for viral algorithms were totally wiped out by a stark, unmoving silence. It was the petrified freeze of someone caught dead to rights in a dubious cycle, knowing any movement verifies guilt and any word digs a deeper hole. Vance finally shut the binder, generating a quiet thud across the audio feed. "Allow me to pose an alternative inquiry," he suggested gently. With no papers left to expose, the file lay shut, flanked by his unwavering hands. "I'd like to discuss the citizens wiring you those $16, Representative." His cadence shifted again, taking on the deep familiarity of two people conversing intimately across an old dining table. Imagine a diligent Jackson Heights nail technician in your district named Maria, earning just $31,000 annually, who has faithfully contributed $16 monthly via Act Blue since 2018. Allowing the calculation to linger, he added, over 8 years, that exceeds $1,500, which equates to 5 weeks of food for Maria. Then there's Carlos, a double-shift dishwasher on Roosevelt Avenue who chips in $20 per fundraising video, convinced you are his ticket to a better life. Softening his gaze, Vance continued, "Consider Dorothy, a Parkchester retiree relying on Social Security who pledges $10 monthly simply because your TV appearances remind her of her own granddaughter." Pausing amid an incredibly heavy silence, Vance stated, "Over those 8 years, Maria's leasing costs skyrocketed. Carlos remains stuck working double shifts, and Dorothy's complex still lacks winter heating. Furthermore, local small businesses suffer a grueling 9-month permit process. Poverty sits at 16%, unemployment is at 9%, and your homeownership rate of 27% is the absolute bottom in all of New York State." Raising one finger, he highlighted, "You hauled in $9.6 million over a single quarter, dominate every social media channel as the most popular congressional figure, addressed the Munich Security Conference, strutted the Met Gala, and sparked 2028 presidential rumors. However, across 8 years as a U.S. representative, you have authored 0 pieces of enacted legislation." He let that crushing digit resonate. 0. While you championed the non-binding Green New Deal in 2019, it never hit the floor. You then took credit for the Inflation Reduction Act, despite it lacking any of your Green New Deal clauses. When pressed on funding your $93 trillion pitch, you mocked critics as sounding like Dr. Evil. Representative, that isn't governing, that's just producing a viral soundbite. Squaring his posture, Vance declared, upon entering the Senate, my initial act was partnering with Democrat Sherrod Brown on the Railway Safety Act. We avoided live streams and social posts, choosing instead to draft concrete legal frameworks to avert another East Palestine disaster. Our bill passed into law, meaning Ohio youths are tangibly safer due to a formalized, presidentially endorsed, legally binding document. That, Representative, highlights the core distinction between making laws and generating content. Therefore, my question isn't regarding Dr. Boyle, the couture, or the PAC, but rather those 571,000 constituents. What tangible benefit did they obtain? I'm not asking about your tweets, proposals, or dead-end resolutions. I am asking what those 571,000 individuals secured for their $16.81. Which local family rests warmly tonight thanks to your specific legislation? Which mom and pop shop launched due to a regulatory fix you spearheaded? And what hungry child is fed today due to a federal initiative you personally established? A horrific, absolute silence devoured the chamber. I can specifically identify the municipalities, the street corners, and the very households in Middletown Vance urged. On Verity Parkway, a rehabilitation center operates thanks to bipartisan federal dollars I obtained. East Palestine enjoys upgraded water purification because of a bill I co-wrote. And in southeastern Ohio, a trio of addiction clinics launched via an amendment I tacked onto a defense bill, an Action Cable News ignored because its goal was functional, not flashy. So, Representative, what exactly can you name? That lethal inquiry hovered thickly in the room, dangling in that uniquely painful manner characteristic of questions, demanding a precise answer that just isn't there. Ocasio-Cortez slightly parted her lips, reflexively preparing to launch a frantic rebuttal, but then she halted abruptly. She froze because the hasty defense materializing in her mind consisted solely of sweeping concepts which the vice president had just strictly disqualified. His challenge mercilessly demanded real names, real cities, and real people, yet her budding response possessed none of them. Painfully and gradually, she shut her mouth while Vance patiently held his ground, refusing to smugly interrupt the quiet. Raised in the fractured rust belt of Middletown, he possessed a deep comprehension of profound silence that D.C. elites lacked. Unlike dialogue, silence cannot be manipulated. A PR squad cannot cleverly trim doctor or recontextualize it. Inside a congressional chamber, silence stands as the solitary element that means precisely what it portrays. 7 seconds passed, then 8, then 9, then 10, 11. 11 excruciating seconds ticking by in an intensely illuminated hall with dozens of lenses locked onto her expression. Ocasio-Cortez cast her highly emotive gaze downward toward the desk, avoiding the stiff hand of her lawyer. Refusing to acknowledge the damning paperwork, she stared at an empty spot on the glossy wood squarely between her shaking hands, a space holding no words, no tools, and absolutely no salvation. She wasn't struggling to find vocabulary, for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had never once lacked something to say in her professional career. However, Vance's savage inquiry was foundational, necessitating proof of a real-world statute that she had personally and meticulously crafted. And she just didn't possess one. The gap between an attempt and an achievement is the heartbreaking void separating internet fame from guaranteeing winter warmth for an elderly constituent. I construct realities for those who elected me, Vance murmured, ultimately raising his eyes to the bewildered committee head. You construct an audience. I yield my time. Visibly rattled, Chairman Comer glanced down, stating, Representative, the floor is yours to reply. So, she replied, It was imperative that she spoke up, having been forged over 8 years by dominating the potent digital cycle of communal anger and algorithm optimization. Clocking in at precisely 2 minutes and 14 seconds, her retort was mechanically perfect. She eloquently highlighted the severe affordability crisis, blue-collar struggles, her modest upbringing, and the political weaponization of congressional oversight. She forcefully attacked the vice president's unorthodox attendance as improper, angrily noted the excessive scrutiny endured by minority congresswomen, and boldly pledged to relentlessly advocate for the vulnerable populations of New York's 14th District. It was a masterfully slick delivery, with each phrase calibrated to produce a rock-solid, highly shareable moment for platforms like X and TikTok, the frantic output of a massive PR machine capable of producing armor for any given scenario. Yet it resolved utterly nothing, completely sidestepping the $885,000 routed via the obscured corporate entity. It ignored the alarming threat of imprisonment cited by the FEC commissioner. It omitted the lavish Met Gala expenses settled only upon the initiation of an ethics probe. It skipped over the devastating $18,000 transferred to a ketamine doctor masked as executive coaching. It totally bypassed the clear behavioral loop. Acquire immediately, justify eventually, reimburse upon detection. Crucially, it failed to answer, what did the voters get? And it was powerless to wash away those 11 agonizing seconds of prior silence. Showing no reaction to her monologue, Vance was already systematically packing up his documents. Silently shutting the file, he rose effortlessly, fastened his dark blazer, offered a courteous nod to the stunned chairman and frozen committee, and departed the room. He didn't even glance at Ocasio-Cortez as he exited, as there was no need. The online platforms erupted immediately, with the footage aggressively self-sorting across various apps according to the precise flavor of partisan fury that fuels each specific echo chamber. Leadership training became the initial mega-viral segment to hit the mainstream. This video showcased Vance icily reciting the Dr. Boyle payouts, followed by the brutal pause and the knockout question. Spanning a mere 19 seconds, it racked up a staggering 27 million shares within the initial 18 hours. Its horrific potency lay in its irrefutable clarity, a precise dollar amount, a mental health professional specializing in ketamine, and a bogus expense label that made no sense. The pattern emerged as the second major hit, displaying Vance relentlessly laying out the timeline: PAC, LLC, Met Gala, psychiatrist. This specific footage circulated heavily among deep-dive political pages, analytical legal networks, and government oversight groups. The mantra, take first, explain later, pay when caught, rapidly evolved into the deadly catchphrase weaponized by top-tier editorial boards nationwide to hammer her over the ensuing fortnight. Then came the definitive final blow, the third clip titled, What Did They Get? It captured the entire grueling exchange, from his mention of the 571,000 disadvantaged donors through the 11 agonizing seconds of quiet, concluding with the ultimate mic drop line about building things versus building a following. Because it posed a foundational question applicable to any contemporary leader who exploited civic duty for personal celebrity, this exceptionally rare video managed to shatter rigid partisan barriers. A terrifying 7-second snippet dubbed The Hand constituted the fourth viral hit, zeroing in on the elite lawyer pressing her palm firmly against the desk. Astute legal minds instantly recognized the dire motion, with an ex-federal prosecutor noting on X that a lawyer physically restraining their client from addressing a straightforward FEC query on live television proves the filing itself is deeply flawed. The ensuing political fallout was swift, foundational, and ruinous, prompting the FEC to release a blunt memo within 3 days, committing to rapidly accelerate their probe into the Dr. Boyle payouts. operating independently. A vocal FEC commissioner directly referenced Vance's testimony as the catalyst for serious concerns demanding immediate scrutiny. Just 2 days following the monumental clash, Dr. Boyle's professional webpage was suddenly deactivated. His terrified staff pushed out a desperate single-sentence response: Dr. Boyle does not comment on patients or clients. By neither affirming nor rejecting her status as a patient, this highly calculated phraseology signaled to shrewd legal observers that the doctor had likely received severe counsel regarding a looming federal summons. Unanimously, the House Ethics Committee adopted the referral, launching a colossal combined investigation into 3 disastrous areas: the Met Gala freebies, the early PAC network, and the recent psychiatric expenditures. The formal, unanimous acceptance of the referral by the House Ethics Committee marked a historic milestone, establishing the very first multi-count ethics review ever opened against a sitting progressive member of Congress since the squad's triumphant formation in 2019. This regulatory escalation was quickly followed by the Department of Justice issuing an intensely calculated, carefully worded statement, the exact kind of terrifying Washington prose that seems to say absolutely nothing on the surface, while quietly signaling the absolute end of the world. The agency explicitly noted that they were actively reviewing whether the statute of limitations considerations that inform the 2022 disposition might be thoroughly reconsidered in light of the explosive new information brought to the attention of their office. Panicked legal experts and seasoned political analysts frantically translated the subtext of the memo, recognizing that while the DOJ was not explicitly promising a swift or immediate prosecution, it was absolutely promising its undivided, terrifying attention. In the hyper-reactive ecosystem of Washington, D.C., such intense, focused federal attention acts as the definitive grim reaper that inevitably precedes political destruction. The ultimate collapse of the Congresswoman's carefully fortified empire began rapidly with her most vital asset, the grassroots donors. Leaked internal ActBlue data revealed a catastrophic, unprecedented 34% overnight plunge in small-dollar funding, sending shockwaves through the progressive establishment and prompting major political bundlers alongside organizations like MoveOn.org to immediately freeze her campaigns to avoid severe legal exposure. In a single afternoon, her whispered, long-held 2028 presidential ambitions stopped dead in their tracks, entirely crushed under the weight of the compounding scandals. Even her once unshakable home district turned on her with shocking speed as angry, working-class constituents openly revolted, demanding an unscripted, transparent town hall meeting to address the alarming $18,000 psychiatrist bill, a grassroots demand that her insular office haughtily and completely ignored. Her political firewall, built over nearly a decade of media dominance, completely and thoroughly crumbled into dust. Her closest ideological allies within the squad offered absolutely nothing in her defense, retreating into a state of deafening silence or offering copy-pasted hollow platitudes, while the broader progressive media landscape violently fractured on live television as former staunch defenders began demanding real explanations. Panicking under the immense pressure, Ocasio-Cortez's office dumped a hollow late-night press release that completely ignored every single specific financial allegation leveled against her. The defensive digital statement earned a pitiful, humiliating 4,000 shares across social media, finding itself completely eclipsed and buried by JD Vance's staggering 1 million view viral clip. Vance himself refused all subsequent press interviews, offering Politico just one chilling, definitive text message that summarized the entire saga. The filings are public, the pattern is public, the silence was public. The profound human cost of this political implosion was felt deeply in Jackson Heights, Queens, where a working-class woman named Rosa locked the doors to her cramped nail salon after another grueling, exhausting shift. The cheap television mounted on the salon wall still murmured with the disastrous CNN hearing replay, broadcasting the destruction to an empty room. Rosa had watched the political annihilation in scattered fragments all day long, but the cold reality of the situation only truly sank in when a loyal client softly asked her a devastatingly simple question: has she ever actually helped you? Rosa stood in the quiet salon and thought honestly about her own delayed business permit and the hard-earned $16 she had blindly, faithfully donated every single month for 7 long years. Watching Ocasio-Cortez's panicked, defensive 11 seconds of total silence replay on the screen, a disillusioned Rosa opened her Act Blue application on her phone, her trembling thumb hovering directly over the cancel button. She ultimately held back and couldn't press it just yet, not because she still possessed a shred of belief in the platform, but because letting go of that desperate, hard-held hope was far heavier and more painful than the actual money she had lost. Hundreds of miles away in Middletown, Ohio, an opioid recovery counselor named Crystal Atkins watched the exact same television broadcast inside a sterile clinic break room. Beside her, an exhausted on-duty nurse openly wept, knowing intimately and personally that a $16 donation in a shattered, economically depressed town often means choosing between putting gas in the car or buying basic groceries for the week. Crystal stared intently at the glowing screen, watching the polished image shatter, and whispered aloud to the empty room that the Congresswoman simply performs caring, and 571,000 desperate, struggling people faithfully pay her just to watch the show. As the broadcast replayed Vance delivering his final devastating legislative blow, Crystal quietly rinsed her coffee cup in the sink and walked back out to the floor to save her patience. The television screen slowly faded to a commercial block, leaving behind one single, echoing truth that defined the entire event. I build things, you build a following. This entire scenario serves as a violent, undeniable intersection where a vacuous, highly manufactured political persona collides directly with working-class reality. If JD Vance's quiet, devastating folder of public receipts successfully reminded you of the fundamental, staggering difference between a true, dedicated legislator and a superficial social media influencer, smash that like button right now. Subscribe immediately for more investigative stories where hard, undeniable evidence completely destroys empty, theatrical rhetoric. And be sure to share this video with anyone who has ever forfeited their hard-earned money to a broken political promise. Comment your favorite, most shocking moment of the hearing below. Was it the intricate $885,000 pack shell game, the luxury Met Gala dress controversy, the ketamine psychiatrist disbursements, or those 11 agonizing, silent seconds of total panic? Make sure to turn on your notifications, because with the House Ethics Committee circling and the Department of Justice actively watching, the political fallout of this hearing is just beginning. Across America, exhausted, everyday voters are finally daring to ask the most dangerous, transformative question in all of politics: what did I actually get? She performs, he remembers. She builds a following. He builds things. God bless.